influencer named Wendy was contacted by a hotel in Miami, Florida that wanted to see if she'd be willing to stay at their property over Memorial Day weekend. They said they were willing to cover all of her expenses as long as she was willing to post a couple of times while she was at the hotel showing off how great the hotel was. They also told her to bring along a female friend and that friend, they would cover all of her expenses as well. Everybody was either busy or wasn't that interested or they had plans. And so since she did not want to cancel, she thought, well, it can't be that big of a deal if I bring along a male friend. And so she reached out to her good friend Mitch. I need someone to go with me. They asked for a female, but you're gonna have to do. They fly first class to Miami, they go out to the curb, and right away, Wendy sees there's this really well-dressed guy with dark sunglasses on, and he's holding up a sign that has her last name on it and the logo of the hotel on it. And this guy looks at her and he says, okay, well, where's your friend? And that's when she says, oh, well, actually, I brought Mitch because none of my girlfriends wanted to go. So I brought Mitch along. And so this guy lowers his sunglasses and he looks at Mitch and he kind of looks up and down. Then he puts his sunglasses back and he turns and he walks towards this beautiful black SUV that's parked right up against the curb. And so Wendy and Mitch follow him. And as soon as Wendy and Mitch sit inside of this car, the driver is visibly upset. He's kind of ranting and raving. He has a very thick accent and he's saying, where is the other girl? You're not supposed to have a guy. It's two girls, not one girl, one guy. It's two girls. Where is the other girl? And so Wendy's trying to explain to the driver that I know you asked for a female friend, but I didn't have a female friend. And so I brought him along. I will pay for him. I'm not asking you guys to pay for him. But the driver didn't seem that upset about who was paying for Mitch. His frustration came from a place of being frustrated, like they weren't going to be able to do whatever they had planned to do because now Mitch is in the mix. The guy that had originally greeted Wendy and Mitch hopped in the front seat and he and the driver started arguing with each other in Portuguese. And so for about a minute, Wendy and Mitch are looking at each other like, what is going on here? And these guys are yelling at each other and then they stop and the driver turns around again and one more time he says to Wendy, where is the other girl? And Wendy says, there is no other girl. It is Mitch and I. That is it. At this point, the driver makes a sound like he was disgusted with both of them and he raises his hand up like this and he turns to face the road in front of him. And the guy that had originally greeted Wendy and Mitch, he gets out of the passenger seat, goes around to the back, opens the back of the truck, takes their luggage out, throws it onto the curb, goes to the door that is closest to Mitch, opens it up, and he tells them to get out. And so Wendy and Mitch climb back out onto the curb. The guy shuts the door behind them. He hops back in the front seat, and that car peels away. That was it. At this point, Wendy's thinking to herself, I bet if I can just get in touch with the people at the hotel, the people I had spoken to, that they can clear this whole thing up. And so for a couple of minutes, Wendy is watching her phone, waiting for a response. And at some point, Mitch says to her, by the time we get a response, we probably could have just taken an Uber over to the hotel and spoken to them directly. They hop in an Uber and they drive the short distance to this hotel. And as soon as they get out, Wendy notices something that at the time did not seem like a big deal, which was the logo of the hotel, the one in real life right in front of her. It was a little bit different than the one that is on the Instagram page, the one she'd been talking back and forth with. That was their profile picture. It's different than the one in real life. And so that stood out to her just because she had looked at that page a number of times. But it was definitely the same hotel, and so she didn't think much of it. And she and Mitch walked inside right up to the front desk, and Wendy asked to speak with a manager. And shortly thereafter, a manager comes out, and she asks Wendy and Mitch to come into her office. They go inside and she says, okay, guys, what's going on? What do you need? And so Wendy explains the framework of the deal she had negotiated with Marissa. And she said, look, when I got to the airport, the guys that picked us up were incredibly rude and they wouldn't give us a ride here. And I just want to let you know what happened. We don't care. We got a ride here, but we just figured you should know. And the woman looks at her kind of puzzled and she says, who was the person you talked to? You said Marissa? And Wendy's like, yeah, Marissa. She's the marketing person here. And the manager looks at her and she says, no, I'm the marketing person and my name's Kelly. I think you're at the wrong hotel, because we don't have any influencers that are here right now, and I would have known about this. Wendy can't believe it, and she pulls up the Instagram page she's been talking to, and she shows it to the manager. And the manager takes it, and she's pretty surprised by what she's looking at. And she's like, this is our old account. We deleted this, or I thought we deleted this. We have a new one because we rebranded. We have a brand new logo. Everything's new, and we just felt like we'd start fresh. So I don't know who owns this account now, but that is our account. It's just we don't use it anymore. I don't know how anyone got a hold of it. At this point, it clicked for Wendy that this whole thing was a facade, that this whole time she was being conned, and what really scared her is to what end? What were they trying to do with her? Had she shown up with the other female friend, what would they have done with her? But at this moment, Wendy just feels totally overwhelmed by the entire moment. She's so embarrassed that she thought this was real, and she dragged Mitch along, and this whole thing was just fake. She's so embarrassed that she just approached this manager who basically said, that's all fake. And so she just wanted to leave. And so she stands up and she says, I'm really sorry for wasting your time to the manager. And she and Mitch leave. She goes outside and she just sits down and she's crying. And Mitch says, hey, you really ought to call the police and let them know this happened. And so Wendy does call the police and she explains what happened. And she's surprised when they say, hey, where are you right now? We'd love to send a detective over to you to talk to you a little bit more about what happened. And so Wendy tells them where they are, and she's a little bit surprised that they want to send a detective over to talk about this, because in her mind, this isn't that big of a deal. I mean, it's a big deal to her and to Mitch, but nothing really happened. But either way, they go sit on the bench right outside the hotel, and they wait for the detective to show up. And just a couple of minutes later, he does. He walks up, he introduces himself, and he says, hey, let's go inside and grab a table and we can chat. And Wendy and Mitch go over their story one more time. And after they're done, the detective says, look, I don't mean to scare you, but I do want you to understand just how serious of a situation you guys were just in. So in Miami, human traffickers use these phony hotel Instagram accounts to attract young women like yourself to Miami in order to be trafficked. And so they will buy these old business Instagram accounts from companies that have either rebranded or who are going out of business. They'll pay top dollar to acquire those Instagram accounts. And then they will use them in order to get people like you to come to Miami. And so probably the only reason they didn't follow through on their operation is because you brought Mitch along, who posed a threat to them. And so that's why they were upset with you, and that's why they decided it wasn't worth it. So even though this must have been incredibly traumatic for you, I'm sure you were spared a much worse fate.